everyone, and welcome to AI's hidden abode of production, labor, capital, and conflict. It's featuring Tanner Mirrlees. I'm Paul Gray. I'm with the Department of Labor Studies at Brock University, and I'm quite excited for today's webinar. Just want to begin with a land acknowledgement for the land on which Brock University stands. Brock University acknowledges the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Okay, so as I said, our webinar tonight is featuring Tanner Mirrlees. Tanner is an associate professor in communication and digital media studies at Ontario Tech University. And he's recently published a book with Routledge called Work in the Digital Media and Entertainment Industries, Critical Introduction. As for tonight's agenda, Tanner is going to speak on the topic of AI and work for about 40 minutes. And then I'm going to ask a question or two afterwards, and we'll take audience questions and comments at the end. Okay, without further ado, Tanner, take it away.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's really great to be here. Before I begin the formal presentation, I want to take a moment to express my sincere condolences to the family, friends, and comrades of Robert McChesney. I was saddened to learn today that Bob passed away on Tuesday at the age of 72. He was a foundational figure in the political economy of communication, a regular contributor to Monthly Review, and a fierce advocate for a more democratic media system and a more democratic society. Bob understood and never stopped reminding us how incompatible capitalism is with a truly democratic media system. As a scholar, activist, and public intellectual and co-founder of the Free Press, Bob helped generations of critical media researchers understand how corporate media consolidation and neoliberal communication policy erode public discourse and the quality of democratic life. His body of scholarly and journalistic work is immense. A few key titles that I have up here on the screen certainly were influential to me and many others. Rich Media, Poor Democracy, The Problem of the Media, The Political Economy of the Media, Digital Disconnect, Dollarocracy, Blowing the Roof Off the 21st Century. I often find myself returning to many of these works and realizing that the questions I'm wrestling with now were already raised and answered 10, maybe 20 years ago by Bob. So his work reminds us of the importance of historical thinking in the political economy of communication tradition, of tracing the dialectic of continuity and change, and of always keeping social power relations and the question of what type of communication and media system is most amenable to democracy and the public good in view. One of his last books, People Get Ready, speaks directly to the themes of my talk today. Well before the current wave of AI and ChatGPT hype, Bob was already warning us that capitalism's drive to design and unleash technologies oriented to deskilling and automating labor to sever itself from living labor would deepen social inequality and threaten democracy unless it was radically restructured and placed under democratic and public control. So the political economy of communication tradition and the many U.S. and international movements for media democracy indeed lost a very brilliant mind and tireless comrade and activist, but Bob's spirit lives on in our own scholarship and in classrooms and in collective struggles for media reform and democratization today. So again, rest in peace, Bob. And again, my sincere condolences to Bob's family and closest comrades and friends. So I just wanted to start with that because I just found out about an hour ago about Bob's passing, and it's very, very sad indeed. All right, so on to today's talk, which is called AI's Hidden Abode of Production. Let's get started. Whenever I type AI worker into Google search engine, I'm met with an image, one so uniform, so omnipresent that it seems almost ridiculous. It's always the same image that Google seems to give us. A shiny, gleaming, white humanoid android, a cross between C-3PO on a juice cleanse and perhaps a friendly stormtrooper who's decided to pivot to customer service. Same goes when I prompt DALL-E via ChatGPT to generate an image of an AI worker. I type AI worker into ChatGPT and it pumps out variations of the same image over and over again. Same white chrome humanoid android. Yet, there's nothing original in this depiction of the AI worker. Its most likely origin is I, Robot, the 2004 Hollywood film starring Will Smith, itself based upon Isaac Asimov's 1950 sci-fi story collection of the same name. It wouldn't be surprising if OpenAI's generative AI system was trained on a data set that included this film, effectively reproducing its imagery without attribution. This AI worker stereotype isn't just a quirk of Google image search. It reflects an obsession with standardization and a lack of imagination, one reinforced by generative AI models trained on pre-existing copyrighted depictions of AI workers. In this way, the idea of the AI worker is embedded in the very data sets that shape these systems, perpetuating a cycle of uncredited replication. As if to underscore the absurdity of all of this, the AI industry marketing teams appear to have collectively decided that the AI-powered future of labor will look like this. As you see here, a fluorescent lit utopia bathed in laser beams and glowing screens, where human fingers touch robot fingers, where workers sit beside chrome-plated androids in call centers, happily taking calls and typing data into computers for who knows what end. This AI coworker isn't just a tool. It's depicted as a friendly assistant, a coach, a therapist, even a more empathetic manager than a human manager, all designed to soothe anxieties about automation. In the AI industry's techno-optimist discourse, AI doesn't replace workers. It enhances them, resulting in massive productivity gains, win-win for all. It promises not just continuity, but improvement, the standard techno-utopian fantasy. The AI robots reassuringly smile at us, reminding us they're human colleagues who in turn are presumably so thrilled to collaborate with an entity that never takes a lunch break and cheerfully eliminates their position without hesitation. This dominant image of the AI worker, a sleek, white, friendly office android, is ubiquitous across business blogs, magazines, websites, championing generative AI as the best thing since the Jetsons. But there's something deeply anachronistic about this vision, even the vision we see right here. This is a fantasy ripped straight from 1990s office culture. Think about the sitcom Office Space, even perhaps in the early 2000s. The problem here, of course, is that fewer and fewer people actually work like this anymore. The office itself is increasingly a ghost, a relic from a time before corporations discovered they could offload operational costs onto workers, who are now expected to labor from home, from coffee shops, from different time zones, from anywhere, but also nowhere, at any time, but also on time, on call forever. And yet the AI worker is always depicted as the pristine office employee, the happy assistant and coworker, never a freelancer, never a gig worker, never a precarious microtasker scraping together pennies on an app. This AI coworker image serves as a distraction, a polished decoy obscuring the real exploited human workers whose labor sustains the entire illusion of artificial intelligence. Thus, we must probe AI's hidden abode of production, a world rarely glimpsed in the glossy corporate visions of our AI-assisted future. So, in Capital Volume 1, Karl Marx famously critiqued bourgeois political economy for portraying capitalism as a realm of freedom, equality, and voluntary exchange, while obscuring the true foundation, the hidden abode of production, the factory floor, the workshop, the mine, where workers' labor power is exploited. A similar mystification now pervades contemporary discourse on artificial intelligence. AI is too often framed as an independent or autonomous force, a self-governing marvel that seemingly materializes out of thin air, independent of human knowledge, human skill, human creativity, and most notably, exploitation. AI is imagined as self-generating, self-learning, an agent, rather than a product of vast human labor networks that remain concealed behind slick interfaces and platforms and service sites that we log into. As the author of The Eye of the Master, A Social History of Artificial Intelligence shows, what we call AI is produced actually by a global workforce. Like all technologies, AI is inseparable from human labor in at least two ways. First, AI is created, trained, and maintained by humans. Most AI systems do not generate intelligence autonomously. Rather, they extract, encode, and operationalize human knowledge. As Pasquinelli observes, quote, collective knowledge in labor is the primary source of the very intelligence that AI comes to express. Secondarily, AI is not just a neutral tool. It is wielded by some humans to manage, deskill, automate, and try to control others. So far from being an autonomous force, AI functions within capital's already existing complex division of labor, where managers, on behalf of shareholders, use it to reinforce existing hierarchies of power organizationally in pursuit of efficiency, productivity, and profit. The lesson here, like Marx's, is that to truly understand new technology, we must step beyond the spectacle of its autonomy and into its hidden abode of production. In this case, where human workers make AI possible only to have their roles erased, their labor devalued, and in many cases, their own jobs threatened by the very same technological systems that they engineer and that they train. Other recent works likewise point to the human labor undergirding AI. And I highly recommend the book by James Muldoon, Mark Graham, and Caleb Kant, and also a new report by Data and Society that you see here on the actual human labor force of AI today. So we live in an era where corporations employ labor to develop technologies designed to eliminate their own dependence on labor, disrupting industries and sectors across the board. The factories of the world being filled with fewer and fewer blue-collared workers and more robots being programmed to assemble everything from Ford and GM automobiles to Nike and Adidas sneakers. Warehouses like those run by Amazon, employing workers who, of course, labor alongside robots, dollies designed to fill and carry shelves of books, and beauty accessories to meagerly paid packers that nimbly bundle these commodities into the boxes shipped directly to our doors on demand, just in time, sometimes even by drone. Google self-driving cars may one day cut cabbies and also Uber drivers out of the transportation market. Customer service jobs that are designed away by user-friendly interfaces that shift tasks once done by paid workers to unpaid consumers. Order your own Happy Meal at McDonald's, resembling a giant iPad, those kiosks that we input our orders into. Be your own travel agent on Expedia. Self-check out your IKEA box and then assemble its contents into a bookshelf from the comfort of your home. Wall Street traders squaring off against algorithmic bots and data entry specialists displaced by data entry software. Now, what's new today is not that corporations are producing and selling technological systems to other corporations looking for efficiencies or deskilling or automating certain jobs in old industries. That's the history of capitalism and technology. But what I'd argue is new today is the ubiquity of generative AI systems disrupting new and emerging industries, along with professions and occupations once imagined to be safe from deskilling and automation. So in one of the chapters of my new book, I conceptualize generative AI platforms like OpenAI's ChatGPT as exemplary of AI automation systems made by the labor of some humans to deskill and potentially displace the labor of other humans, including the professionals we once imagined to be unautomatable. In much of the post-industrial knowledge economy, information economy, services economy theory that came of age in the fourth quarter of the 20th century, core thinkers assumed that intellectual, cognitive, creative, and communicative skills would be essential for workers to safeguard themselves against deskilling and automation happening in the industrial manufacturing sectors. So Fritz Matschlipp, The Production and Distribution of Knowledge, in 1962, argued that to stay ahead of automation, workers would need to possess expert knowledge. Peter Drucker, in The Age of Discontinuity, developed this idea further, conceptualizing knowledge workers as those who would rely on specialized expertise to remain competitive. Daniel Bell, in the famous The Coming of the Post-Industrial Society, expanded this by asserting that theoretical knowledge workers would possess the abstract thinking skills and complex problem-solving skills to keep them competitive in the labor market. At the end of the Cold War, Robert Reich, in The Work of Nations, wrote of symbolic analysts, highly skilled professionals engaged in intellectual work. By the mid-1990s, Manuel Castells, in The Rise of the Network Society, likewise emphasized that in a global networked economy of services, the ability to manipulate information and innovate ideas would be more valuable than manual skills. And of course, on the left, Michael Hart and Antonio Negri's Empire and Multitude argued that post-industrial capitalism elevated immaterial labor, cognitive, communicative, and affective skill sets over traditional mechanical or manual labor forms. So this is basically this like fourth quarter of the 20th century information, communication, media, knowledge, society discourse on the future of work, all presuming that these core sort of mechanical, non-manual skills would be essential to being competitive in the labor market. Well, these arguments had real weight between the 1970s, perhaps even till now. It is possible that moving forward, generative AI systems will complicate the assumption held by theorists of the post-industrial knowledge information and network society. Knowledge may no longer be enough to AI-proof the worker. Unlike forms of automation in earlier ages or stages, which primarily displaced manual labor, AI is encroaching on so-called white-collar professions, such as writing, editing, communication, creativity, abstraction, research and analysis, knowledge synthesis, even aspects of interpersonal, intercultural, emotional, and social intelligence. Furthermore, professions that required advanced degrees, once seen as the pinnacle of knowledge work. You had to go to university and graduate with an advanced degree to basically get that job that was not the MIC job or not the factory job. These also are now being targeted or even being replaced by AI in ways that we're only beginning to observe and assess. And I'll give a few examples. News firms are increasingly embracing AI to continue to downsize their workforce, automating tasks like news aggregation, content generation, even fact-checking, while journalists who remain in these firms are integrating AI into their workflows, de-skilling themselves by relying upon automated writing tools, transcription software, and algorithmic content curation. Across the publishing industries, editors and copy editors are increasingly being displaced by generative AI as firms adopt automated proofreading and editing tools to reduce labor costs. As a result, many editing and copy editing jobs have been eliminated or transformed into lower paid AI-assisted supervisory positions. DALL-E and Midjourney are supplanting paid gigs once done by visual artists, automating illustration, concept art, design work at a fraction of the time and cost. As businesses, advertisers, and content creators turn to AI-generated visuals, freelance illustrators, graphic designers, and digital artists are seeing their commissions dry up, with many forced to lower prices to compete or adapt by using AI to intensify and speed up their own labor process. NVIDIA Picasso and Leonardo AI are being adopted by video game studios, automating tasks once requiring skilled artists, video game designers, animators, developers. AI is now generating textures, environments, characters, even animation sequences, reducing the need for traditional concept artists, 3D modelers, visual designers. As studios integrate AI into production pipelines, remaining workers are pressured to adapt by using AI tools, doing the jobs of many all at once. Suno, even in the music industry. This is often called the ChatGPT of music creation. This can generate fully formed songs from simple text prompts, exacerbating the difficulty faced by musicians to make music and make a living, get paid. Record labels are experimenting with AI-generated music to cut costs, diminishing demand for paid songwriters, even session musicians. Meanwhile, some artists who remain in the industry, like Timbaland, advised to Suno now, are promoting AI tools to artists as basically a way to get ahead quick. Even in higher education, one of society's centers of knowledge production and the central training mechanism for future professionals wanting to go on and get those white-collar professional jobs, is disrupted by AI. Already, we read about AI-disrupted universities, colleges, high schools rushing to embrace AI in pursuit of efficiencies in a broader neoliberal political economy that has already basically cut or reduced public expenditures to the sector over the past 50 years, as we know. It's being deployed to grade assignments, providing instant feedback to students, generating lesson plans, tutoring students, displacing human tutors, teaching assistants, and even some adjunct faculty. So these disrupted and disconcerting conditions are accompanied by all kinds of speculations about a new imagined future without work, or a future where there are too many people searching for paid work to live, but not enough paid jobs to do. Goldman Sachs, for example, predicts generative AI will automate at least 300 million jobs out of existence across various sectors and industries, widening the already wide divide between the haves and have-nots. Even still, the advent of generative AI is not, I argue, a story of intelligent algorithms and machines fully and completely deskilling and displacing human labor and leading to a fundamentally different, fully automated future economy and society. AI is still very much shaped by an old mode of production and by government policy and by social power relations. Furthermore, AI has not forced a rupture with or a substantive break from a handful of very, very big oligopolistic tech corporations continue to enjoy near monopoly powers in pursuit of profit while relying upon an international division of paid and unpaid human labor to serve the making of their hardware, software, and AI services. So you see here the big five: Alphabet, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Facebook, Amazon, Apple. These are the biggest owners and controllers of most of the AI systems and platforms that currently exist in the marketplace. It's a long-standing tendency of concentration in capital, centralization, and control, and we see this, of course, happening here. Take the example of OpenAI. We think that OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT and DALL-E, is just some sort of nonprofit, right? Well, no, it's imagined as a nonprofit, but it's heavily invested in by Microsoft. Also, OpenAI's for-profit arm. Within that structure of a nonprofit organization, it has a for-profit revenue-generating arm that basically is projected of $11 billion in revenue in 2025, and its valuation is massive. Yet OpenAI still depends on human labor at every stage: research, development, training, marketing, and these jobs often pay quite well. This AI is owned by a firm that hires and pays for human labor, a combination of very well-paid full-time employees working for that company, but then a whole number of outsourced contractor gig workers as well. Also, this firm's AI datasets depend upon the total sum of historical human labor congealed in all of the knowledge, information, art, and culture it aggregates and uses to train its machines to learn from. So the very datasets, of course, that AI systems are being trained on is basically the aggregation or consolidation of the whole history of human information that gets sort of functionalized and turned into an input into the training of AI that then gets used to be prompted and then output certain content that we then use in various ways. So in sum, we're now at a moment which we can talk about AI labor studies. We see this new field of AI labor studies emerging. It's very interdisciplinary. It's crisscrossing labor studies, sociology, political economy, STS, computer science, ethics, even some fears of business management, communication and media studies. And this has become a vital field, highlighting centrally how AI relies upon human labor, both living and dead, while also being designed to de-skill and automate work and being used by workers in all kinds of new ways. So this is an important field because it challenges deterministic narratives that portray AI as either an autonomous force acting upon workers or a neutral tool that workers simply control or use whatever way they like for. AI labor studies urges us to reject the idea that technology alone drives history, emphasizing how power relations between firms and workers that shape AI's development and use is central. While AI may exert a soft determinism as it becomes embedded in more and more institutions in society, from government to corporations to NGO to education to our everyday lives as users within our own smartphones, the soft determinism will become a fact. But that does not mean that AI is not still being determined by humans and that humans have a role to play in choosing the design and also developing laws, policy, and regulations to shape that as well. If generative AI accelerates automation for profit at the cost of worker precarity, then all workers, of course, must critically engage with the ethical implications of AI vis-a-vis their labor process and their quality of life. But many AI ethics frameworks that I've been reading over the past year, especially those written by AI corporations themselves, treat AI's impact on labor as inevitable rather than contestable. Most of these AI frameworks don't even talk about labor. They don't even talk about the capacity of labor to contest or resist, or perhaps develop other ideas about how AI might be used in the future, or even if they want to use AI for various ends. But what we see in actual existing society right now and over the past few years is that workers across industries are contesting this assumption by actively resisting AI-driven disruptions of their life and labor. In this regard, AI ethics is needed, and we need to center workers in this process. So AI labor ethics, whether informed by labor law, basically passed on by government, potentially upheld by government, or AI ethics as expressed by the collective actions of workers contesting AI's impact on their life and labor, is important. So what I want to do now is just outline these two different approaches to AI labor ethics, as I call it. The first is from above, the other one is from below. So one approach, what we might call AI labor ethics from above, is grounded in labor law and the government agencies responsible for enforcing existing labor law, particularly labor ministers that uphold workers' rights and protections in society, or at least that's what they're tasked to do. Now, This perspective frames AI labor ethics as a function of legal and regulatory structures governing employer-employee relations in the AI industry. Rooted in, of course, some kind of legal positivism, this approach defines ethical labor practices strictly by adherence to labor laws. Now, we know that's limited, of course, but under this model, AI companies that follow labor laws might be considered ethical in some way, while those that violate workers' rights are unethical. So let's take the case. Let's just take the case now. I'm going to model ethical framework of the U.S. Department of Labor. It's tasked with enforcing over 180 federal labor laws, including those affecting AI firms that employ software engineers, data labelers, content moderators, technical support staff. However, many AI companies have found many ways to evade even basic labor law. So we could say these aren't acting so ethically. I'll give you a few examples. The Fair Labor Standards Act should, in theory, guarantee fair wages and overtime pay for workers in the AI sectors employed by AI firms. But the AI industry evades these by outsourcing tasks to workers employed by subcontractors living outside the United States. In the Global South, many AI data annotators and engineers work 12 to 16-hour days under punishing deadlines in incredibly precarious sweatshop conditions, yet basically remain invisible to us. Companies like OpenAI, Meta, Google rely upon thousands of these AI annotators, typically hired through subcontractors like Appen or Scale AI, to teach large language models the difference between right and wrong, coherence and incoherence, good and bad, and everything else. Yet many of these workers earn less than $2 an hour. Some may not be paid anything when toiling to do tasks on gig platforms like Amazon's Mechanical Turk. As a recent MIT report notes, quote, the AI industry profits from catastrophe. Another example, the National Labor Relations Act rules are meant to protect workers' rights to unionize. And if not that, at least collectively discuss labor grievances and problems, right? But tech firms have spent decades undermining basic unionization efforts in the tech sector itself, and the AI sector is no exception. In late 2019, Google dismissed several workers involved in labor organizing and protests against company policies. Other AI and tech industry companies have terminated workers involved in union organizing. In February 2023, Tesla fired over 30 workers at its Buffalo facility shortly after they announced a unionization effort. Daniel Motang, a content moderator employed by Sama in Kenya, which is a Meta contractor, was terminated in 2019 after attempting to organize a union to address bad working conditions and unfair pay. AI workers are now discovering that simply discussing fair wages and ethical concerns about the work they do, let alone trying to organize a union, are met with employer retaliation in the AI industry. On to another. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration rules are supposed to protect workers from hazardous labor conditions, but its weakness in AI workplaces is glaring. AI's hidden labor force includes content moderators who spend hours reviewing user posts so that AI models can learn to recognize and filter out harmful and hateful content from the screens that we're engaging in on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and everywhere else. For example, TikTok's content moderation workforce in Colombia endured traumatizing exposure to violent, abusive, and exploitative content, including murder, child abuse, grotesque imagery with minimal psychological support, high and total surveillance and salary deductions, and the firm has opposed these workers' attempts to unionize repeatedly. The OSHA's whistleblower protection program rules are also ethically important to AI workers who face dangers when trying to speak truth to the power of big tech companies. Timnit Gubru, an AI ethics researcher at Google, and Erica Shimizu Banks, a former Pinterest employee, were fired after publicly communicating about what they considered to be unethical AI practices within these tech workplaces. Furthermore, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission rules aim to protect workers from hiring discrimination. Yet AI itself can be a tool of discrimination by employers when they're trying to hire employees, as AI-powered hiring tools can and do discriminate based upon race, gender, age, and other factors. In 2014, Amazon developed an AI-based recruiting tool intended to streamline the hiring process that was explicitly biased against women. A 2024 study by the University of Washington found that large language AI models favored white associated names 85% of the time and female associated names only 11% of the time during resume evaluations that were being undertaken by AI systems. Clear cases of race and gender discrimination to basically just even gain access to a wage job. Suffice to say, the AI labor ethics from above approach highlights many AI companies to be engaged in definitely bad practices. But there's another way we can think about AI labor ethics. And this is one from below where we center the workers and we center the workers' own experiences and viewpoints and own sense of judgment of right and wrong and good and bad. So in keeping with the workers' inquiry tradition, this approach derives ethical principles about AI and labor directly from workers' collective experiences and actions against capital. It recognizes workers as active agents who make ethical judgments through collective organizing, bargaining, and resistance to AI's impact on their jobs and lives. By centering workers' viewpoints, voices, and value judgments, this AI labor ethics from below affirms the workers' right to contest AI and define the ethics of AI on their own terms. So I want to provide a few examples of AI ethics from below, just to give a few other examples of this. One of the most high-profile worker responses to generative AI has come from Hollywood's writers and actors unions. In 2023, the Writers Guild of America and the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Actors, or SAG-AFTRA, went on strike, demanding protections against the use of AI in script writing and digital likeness reproduction. Writers condemned AI's role in displacing human labor and automating script generation, while actors opposed the unauthorized reproduction of their voices and likenesses. Through these strikes, workers took a clear ethical stance. The use of generative AI by studios for deskilling and automating is wrong, is bad. In practice, their organizing, strikes, and collective bargaining demonstrated a form of AI labor ethics from below, an ethical framework emerging outside of top-down labor laws and government enforcement mechanisms. A second way we notice workers enacting an AI labor ethics from below, and again, the creative industries, the media industries, the entertainment industries, is when publicly calling out and contesting AI firms through high-profile copyright infringement lawsuits. In the process, they're asserting that the AI industry's unauthorized use of their products, of their labor, is wrong. As we know, generative AI models are trained on vast amounts of data, often sourced from all existing copyrighted materials. And this is without the consent of the producer of those works, books, paintings, songs, and so much more. So workers are launching copyright suits to push back against the AI firms using and profiting from their creative work without their consent or without even pay to them. High-profile cases include authors, suing OpenAI, the owner of ChatGPT, for generating unauthorized promotional content based upon novels that have been published. In journalism, the New York Times versus OpenAI and Microsoft focused on AI's use of copyrighted articles without permission. In music, there's a number of other copyright cases emerging right now. And these all can be said to represent a type of AI labor ethics from below, where workers are asserting their rights even to the property of their own labor process, which is the outcome in the form of a copyrighted good or creative work. A third way that workers enact AI labor ethics from below is within the very AI companies that employ them, where employees at major tech firms are pushing it back against what their employers are doing and expecting them to do on the job. Through whistleblowing, resignations, internal protests against management, we see many employees of AI firms framing their employers as unethical, as wrong, as bad. In 2024, Suchir Balaji, a researcher at OpenAI, accused the company of violating even basic US federal laws by using competitors' products to train models like ChatGPT. He was then found dead in November 2024, with authorities ruling it a suicide, though his family suspects foul play linked to his whistleblowing. Workers at Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and OpenAI have also signed petitions. They've leaked memos to the press. They've engaged in whistleblowing. They're exposing AI's exploitative uses and the lack of ethical oversight in the development of this new technology. And workers are not passive or compliant participants in AI's expansion. I think this is a clear example of how workers are actively calling out and disrupting unethical practices within companies, highlighting an ethics from below, where workers are making it very clear to each other, to employers, to the rest of society, that they should be central to how AI is designed and used. Now, fourth way that workers are enacting an AI labor ethics from below is neolitism, where workers metaphorically smash or at least sabotage AI-driven platforms that have been designed or used to de-skill them and automate their jobs away. Gavin Mueller, in Breaking Things at Work, recently argued that sabotaging technologies that capital uses against workers, of course, goes way back to Luddism, a group of 19th century English textile workers who destroyed factory machines that were made to replace them. In response, the British state deployed the military to secure the machines and private property, and then 1813, machine breaking became a capital crime, leading to mass trials, executions, and deportations of these workers, I think, to the prison colony of the British Empire, which was Australia at the time. So the spirit of Luddism today exists and persists in some worker tactics against AI-driven automation. In 2023, artists and programmers created tools like Glaze and Nightshade to introduce imperceptible distortions into AI images, corrupting AI training data and preventing companies from scraping copyrighted work without permission. For workers, this modern form of AI sabotage is a righteous act against bad tech. A fifth way workers are doing AI labor ethics from below is by using social media platforms to launch campaigns to basically raise consciousness about what AI is doing to their labor and to basically win public consent to their cause. They're launching campaigns to contest generative AI's impact on labor, framing its unchecked development as harmful to both workers and society. One prominent example of this is the Center for Artistic Inquiry and Reporting's open letter, co-authored by artist Molly Crabapple and journalist Marissa Marizia Katz, which argued that organizations should be starting just to ban AI generated illustrations from publishing. Signed by thousands of artists, the letter condemned big tech's efforts to automate their creativity, their creative labor, warning that while illustrators' careers are set to be decimated by generative AI, the companies developing the technology are making billions. In this AI labor ethics from below, workers take the social media platforms to build public opposition against AI wrongs, in addition to sort of supporting union movements and also other types of law, policy, and regulation to rein in the powers of these big tech companies. So, in conclusion, there is a labor turn in AI research. This is well underway, and it must be fully integrated into the broader field of AI ethics to forge what I call an AI labor ethics. I also think that the study of AI labor itself is absolutely central now to labor studies in the digital age in 2025. And it's really, really great to see so many researchers across domains and disciplines putting their heads together to think through the complexities and the contradictions of our present moment. In the coming years, this field will be central across disciplines, so ensuring that AI labor ethics from above, below, meaningfully influence AI's design and deployment is not just an ethical imperative, but a practical necessity for developing AI that benefits society and, most of all, the majority of people, which are workers. A labor-centered AI ethics, one that critically examines the labor in AI, the labor of AI, and AI labor ethics from above and below will be key to shaping more just and worker-focused AI futures and also building the movements, organizations, and forms of party policies that we perhaps need to think about a future that is different than this one. And that's my take on AI today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Tanner. That was excellent. I just want to remind folks in the audience that you can post your questions whenever you want. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen there. I encourage you to use it to ask some questions. And I thought I would get us started with a few, Tanner. One thing I wanted to ask you, you said something that I thought was quite striking. You said knowledge, as in knowledge attained through higher education and the like. Knowledge may not be enough to AI-proof the worker. And you were talking about automation, and we've seen some predictions of mass unemployment as the result of the automation encouraged by new technologies, and AI only sort of exacerbating that issue. So I guess my first question is, do you have a sense of what we're looking at here in terms of potential mass automation and unemployment as a result of these technologies? Do you err more towards the techno pessimist, let's say, predictions about how devastating this will be, or more towards the techno optimist interpretations of a kind of fully automated future that will be to widespread benefit? Yeah, where do you stand on this question?
So I think that I'm neither an optimist or a pessimist. I try to be much more dialectical, trying to sort of weigh the pros and cons, the possibilities and limits of each and every technology that I study, including AI. And I think that too often in the whole history of technology and capitalism, these debates, replay time and time and time again. We can go back and read science fiction in the late 19th century that was predicting, fully automated futures that would be kind of like techno-socialist utopias. And there was a lot of hope in that, of course, because, of course, labor processes and the experience of exploitation, alienation, and degradation within factories in 19th century industrial capitalism, it was horrific. And so many, some socialists at the time were saying, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful to liberate or emancipate the worker from this, horribly exploitative and alienating labor process and free up time so they could sort of realize their actual potential as human beings and not be reduced just to particular functions within an assembly line or other sort of process that has nothing to do with their identity, their species being, or even their sense of what a good life or good society could be. The sort of techno-pessimist mode has also been with us. There's no shortage of moral panics, sort of extreme anxieties. These sort of serve as good clickbait when we say the sky is falling and everything is fundamentally radically different now than it was before. And I often feel that that has a bit of a detrimental effect on our capacity to think clearly and reasonably in a complex fashion about what is changing and what's the same. And I often see that some of these very future-oriented and future-leaning declarations in 5 years' time, 97% of these jobs in this particular occupational category, in this particular industry, in this particular sector are going to be eliminated by ChatGPT, for example, work as a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that basically serve one, to hype investments and financialization in the AI sector itself. So this is exactly what investors want to hear, right? If you could basically say the future will be a nearly totally automated AI future, then the companies that are at the forefront of developing these systems are going to get massive investment, create another bubble that will eventually burst once we realize that, well, hey, once again, technology didn't do what we imagined it would do. And secondarily, I think this has a real sort of detrimental capacity on workers themselves, because then workers basically come to imagine that they are basically replaceable and quickly. And they will basically lower their expectations for a better quality job and a better quality life and basically take what they get because they're afraid of what technology is being designed to do and what capital is employing technology to do upon them. So this can also have a disempowering or a neutralizing effect on workers' own sense of agency and capacity to collectively organize and resist and refuse and push back against what capital is or intends to do with machines, right? In this case, technology. But I want to play just a very, very quick a game, okay? And I just want to do something just very quickly here, okay? So Paul, can you just quickly repeat that question to me that you asked at the outset? Something about knowledge work being automated.
Yeah, I was struck by your earlier statement that knowledge may not be enough to AI proof the worker. And I was asking you if, yeah, you could say something about predictions of mass automation and mass unemployment as a result of these new kinds of technologies, and whether you err more towards techno optimism or more towards techno pessimism.
Okay, I'm going to play a little game. Um, all right, well, here's my answer. Generative AI represents a new stage in the automation of labor, a historic tendency in capitalism that Marx identified in Capital, where the bourgeoisie continually revolutionizes the means of production to extract more surplus value from workers. As AI becomes capable of executing intellectual and creative tasks, writing, designing, coding, composing, it signals the subsumption of what was the preserve of mental labor into the same machinery that once absorbed manual labor. Yet this automation does not emancipate workers. It intensifies their exploitation, their alienation. The creative worker becomes de-skilled. The knowledge worker becomes automated. The program becomes the prompt engineer. The writer becomes an editor, an algorithmic slop of shit that we don't need to read. Labor, once the source of personal development, becomes further fragmented and estranged. Under capitalism, even the most imaginative creative labor is reorganized in the image of the machine, with the machine becoming the worker's competitor, not their collaborator. Will there be mass employment? Well, unemployment, the capitalist mode of production, does not introduce technology to liberate labor. It does so to eliminate labor cost. This historical pattern is clear. Capital automates to reduce dependence on living labor, but society does not redistribute the gains. Workers are cast aside, not uplifted. There is no invisible hand that ensures new jobs will emerge for all. The dialectic of automation is not one of shared prosperity, but of intensified exploitation and redundancy. In the near term, generative AI will displace many knowledge workers, teachers, journalists, graphic designers, legal assistants, even coders. In the long run, the reserve army of labor will swell, not shrink. Mass employment is not a glitch, but a feature of capitalist AI automation. Surplus labor exerts downward pressure on wages and conditions, disciplining all of those still employed and settling for less. That wasn't me. That was ChatGPT's response to your question. If I was to write something like that, honestly, despite all of my years of training in political economy and historical materialism and the social shaping of technology, I don't know if my response to your question would be better than what ChatGPT just necessarily generated in response to me typing your prompt in. So I don't really have the answer, but all I know is that I just typed your question into OpenAI's ChatGPT and it gave me a pretty convincing sort of Marxist socialist response.
Hmm. Uh, well, I think that that response probably would pass the Turing test. However, I disagree with you. I think that it wasn't quite as good as what you offered in your presentation. I think that at least one element in your presentation that wasn't in the ChatGPT response was uh, a kind of humanity and humor that perhaps ChatGPT hasn't quite mastered yet, but it's possible it will.
Well, thanks for that, Paul. I appreciate it. I mean, I'm certainly happy to be here in communicating and communication with you, and I'd much prefer chatting with you than ChatGPT, although I know a lot of people are preferring chatbots to people these days. I mean, I've been reading about, for example, the entire psychological and therapeutic practice, right? Integrating new forms of chatbots and generative AI systems. And so you'd think again in a profession, I mean, where again, human interpersonal, intercultural, emotional intelligence is so central, right, to the sort of relational labor that's happening. And even in that particular profession, ChatGPT or AI assistants being employed, that is something I think that we have not experienced in the history of capitalism, right? Where it's those types of relational labor, interpersonal labor, emotional labor, basically being substituted or maybe sometimes supplemented or augmented as well by new technological systems.
Mhm. We've got some great questions coming from the audience, so I think I want to turn to a few of those. The first one is from Cristobal, and Cristobal says, "Great talk. I agree." And the question is, what do you see as the main contributions and gaps in AI labor studies research?
That's a really great question. Thank you, Cristobal. I mean, I think that the main contribution thus far made by scholars of work and labor has just to bring labor into the discussion about AI. And I don't necessarily think it started with researchers per se, although researchers across disciplines, across fields have been interested in these types of questions for some time. I have a wonderful colleague at Ontario Tech University named Peter Lewis, who I was very fortunate to meet, and actually from a computer sort of science and engineering sort of social shaping of technology point of view. And I was like, I didn't have any sense of what was going on in AI as a field. And sort of in other fields that weren't labor studies, we're engaging with these questions, I think, long before folks in labor studies were. Now, that's not to say folks in labor and work studies haven't been dealing with the de-skilling automation technology question in capitalism. They've been doing that forever. But I'm seeing many folks in different areas and different disciplines, putting their heads together and coming up with really, really thoughtful and personal questions about what the implications of AI are for the future of work and labor. And so I think that's itself a value contribution. It's making visible what the technology, what the platform, what the AI service or software renders invisible, which is again human labor and the actual abode of production, the conditions of production, the experiences of production, the labor process, the management of the labor process by the firms that employ these AI workers, the lived experiences of these workers, their alienation, their optimism, their despair, their hopes, what they're actually doing to try to, from within the belly of the AI industry's beast, maybe sort of, carve out or put forward better proposals for AI that their employers and their shareholders might not be as interested in. So just attending to work and labor, making visible the often hidden labor that is at the core of AI's abode of production, I think is one of the most valuable contributions today. And so much of this, I would say, is again, it's happening outside of academia. It's happening by workers themselves in their collective organizing, in their attempt to sort of, share their experiences of work and labor in these particular industries and sectors and form new communities of solidarity. And it's just even, within companies, people like whistleblowing whistleblowing and leaking information and making contact with journalists and trying to reach out to unions and labor organizers and sort of left groups, I mean, is very, very, very inspiring. And I think it's that type of stuff, that AI labor ethics from below, that really can inform our practice as researchers, because they're basically, shedding light on things that we often can't see. One of the challenges, of course, is that most of these workers are often breaking contract when they share what's happening, because they're forced as a condition of employment contract to sign non-disclosure agreements, which basically is a gag order, a way of censoring workers, denying them the right to publicly communicate with one another or with people in society about their experiences of that labor process within the company that employs them. So that's a major challenge. I mean, often scholars of work and labor will try to do, like, ethnographies or anthropologies or, studies of workers by doing interviews with workers and getting a sense of, and we simply can't talk to workers in these sectors. It's very, very hard to get access to these workers because there's real serious risks to their own employment relation, to their wellness, to their capacity to, make their ends meet by getting the salary they need to live, to pay their bills, by speaking to researchers or labor organizers, let alone like militant socialists or whatnot. So this is a very big challenge for research and for development of better law, policy, and regulation that would take the worker's viewpoint seriously and center the worker, as opposed to just abstractions of like the economy or GDP or some obscure notion of productivity gain. So that's what I think the real value of this approach is. Just sort of making visible the often hidden labor of AI in the modern world.
Yeah, your talk reminded me of the German expressionist film Metropolis, where all the workers are basically forced into this underground series of caverns and tunnels, and you have this very slick and beautiful surface, and then the grimy underbelly where the majority of people are forced to make everything work. Yeah. Okay, great. Got another good question here from Kezia this time. The question is, do you know of or see a system that supports royalties for AI use of workers' accumulated knowledge that is being used in its models?
Great question, Kezia. Fantastic. So just again, to give some further context to that, right? The data sets that AI software is essentially trained on by human workers within AI companies, right, is comprised of pre-existing information, content, including like entire archives of novels, of scholarly publications, of websites, of artworks, of, in the case of the creative industries, movies, TV series. So basically, the World Wide Web is scraped for informational content that becomes an input into the training mechanism of AI software that then when you prompt it outputs something based upon that data set. Basically, that's a very, very very simple way of explaining it, but that's the best I can do for now. And the argument, of course, made by workers and often by the companies that hold the property rights to this content is that this is just mass copyright infringement, right? This is a massive violation of, one, the product of the workers' labor. That might be a novel, it might be a scholarly book, it could be a play, it could be an illustration or a painting. And then, of course, from capital's point of view, I mean, the whole business of the media economy is basically renting out content, right, for exhibition distribution markets. They're basically being like, you did not pay us for the use of our Walt Disney movies, or our magazine content, or our newspaper content, or any of the information that we control as a commodity. And they want a piece of that. They want a piece of that, right? So there are some, on the front lines of many of these copyright cases against OpenAI and other firms. Now, I don't, at this point in time, know of a system that would be able to pay out royalties to these workers, these artists, these creators, or to the companies that actually are the owners of that copyright for the use that we see happening in AI. I haven't come across that. I know that some people are pushing for different models like that, so that the idea here is if OpenAI relies upon all of this copyrighted content, then a percentage of its value or something should be paid out to the workers and the companies who are the origin or the source of it. But I'm not really sure how far that's going to go. And if it's going to go anywhere right now, it'd be sort of require like a major set of legal actions. It would require a sympathetic government. It would require a mass social movement of people that are conscious about the issue and care. And it would take a lot of coalition building, I think, to build such a system and get it approved. But I like that question very much, Kezia.
Okay, great. We got another question that is asking about some of the kind of Luddite examples that you offered. But before I get to it, I thought maybe I could just get an elaboration from you. You mentioned that a few people engaged in a form of sabotage that, in a sense, kind of spoiled one of these AI image generators or something like that. So how? Tell me how that works.
I don't know exactly the technicalities of that, but basically I think it's just a way of trying to corrupt the basic sort of data set that AI system is relying upon.
David has a follow-up question here about it. Uh, David asks, while the example of Luddites engaging in resistance from below seemed to be an appropriate comparison to technology designed to sabotage AI, what lesson can be learned from the Luddites? Did they achieve meaningful, lasting change? If not, what can a modern Marxist learn from the Luddites?
Love that question, David. I think that the most important lesson, of course, from the Luddites that should be retained and renewed and revisited and told over and over again, it's that technology is not necessarily or always already value neutral. Technology can be designed to produce outcomes that benefit one class or set of class interests at the expense of another. Not necessarily in a general sense, but in maybe a particular sectoral sense or occupational sense, that it's not a win-win. That technology sort of when developed, designed, released into the world will have consequences. And it will often have consequences for certain groups of workers whose livelihoods, whose labor power has been basically rendered less valuable or even obsolete as a result of the introduction to that new technology to the economy and the wider society. I mean, and secondarily, the lesson of the Luddites is that workers don't necessarily need to accept this. They don't need to be passive in this process. That workers can come together, even if partially, even if in some sort of contingent, sort of losing battle, to express their refusal, their dissent against what these machines have been designed to do, against them. That's also a lesson that we can read from Capital when Marx is talking about machines and so on as well. Um, so ultimately, the sort of technology often comes into the world surrounded and packaged with a number of optimistic narratives. The technology is going to improve society for the better. We're all going to use it to do whatever we want, to improve our lives, to increase our efficiency, to be more productive, solve our problems. The Luddites basically say, whoa, 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 slow down. Is that necessarily the case? Well, no, it's definitely not always the case. There are often winners and there are losers as a result of the emergent diffusion, adaptation, and effect of many new and emerging technologies, with AI being, a key example of that when it comes to sort of just basic professions. And the Luddites tell us that story. In terms of the actual tactic of machine breaking, how could we imagine that in today's world? I think is a really interesting political and conceptual question. Like, is it possible to break AI systems? What would that actually entail? But furthermore, would that be sufficient to bringing about the types of politics we would need to fundamentally transform the world for the better? I don't know. I mean, the history of the Luddites was also one of basic defeat, right? Like the Luddites basically had the military deployed against them, with machine breaking declared a capital crime. We had them either executed or imprisoned or sent off to Australia to a prison camp, right? So, I mean, this small sort of victory, as valuable as it was, the story of the Luddites, as valuable as it was, I don't think should be sort of like the beginning and end of how we talk about technopolitics from a Marxist or a democratic socialist or a class sort of oriented viewpoint today. I think that's a tactic. It's not a strategy. And if I can basically, quote my dear, colleague Paul today, we need to move from sort of, a politics of tactical protest to one of politics, party, and state. And that's one of the key lessons I think that we're still learning 50 years after the New Left, right? Is how do you shift from these tactical interventions that are very meaningful and very purposeful, and that do have small effects, that can be sort of morale boosters and that can bring people together, and definitely do constitute a form of refusal and contestation that we should write histories about, histories of below about. But they are not in themselves sufficient to organizing, building, or bringing about a politics of social transformation at a more macro level. To do that, we need organizations, we need parties, we need state power. The right has taught us that lesson, as we see the techno-fascists in power in the United States right now, supported by many tech bros at the helm of these companies that are billionaires. They have been the most efficient and effective neo-Gramscians probably for 50 years now. They've done the war of position, the war of maneuver, and they've basically won state power. And Project 225 is a shining example of that. So the left is nowhere close to building anything comparable, and we need to really start thinking more comprehensively about strategy, parties, and state power if we want to have a future.
Okay,
Thanks for your
great.
book, Paul. Paul wrote the best book on this, by the way, if you haven't read it.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I appreciate it. Thank you. Um, got a great question for Marnie here, kind of speaking about organizations and developing organizational power. Marnie asks, do you see unions outside the arts and media unions negotiating clauses that prohibit employers from replacing workers with AI, similar to the old no contracting out clauses?
Okay. I haven't looked very closely at the many unions outside of the entertainment and media industries. I mean, the big sort of victories I'm most familiar with relate to the writers and the actors, which indeed they did negotiate right within those collective agreements, clauses that would prohibit their employers, i.e., the studios, from displacing them or substituting them with generative AI systems. Historically, if we were to study sort of the union movement in technology, there have been different moments in time. I remember in the 60s in the United States, a lot of industrial workers, a lot of union workers were putting technology politics and the question of deskilling and automation, as a bargaining issue. Again, this debate within the labor movement, within the union movement, has ebbed and flowed over time. And I think a historical question to ask is like, sort of, why is that the case? Why hasn't technology designed to deskill and automate workers out of a livelihood always been front and center to the existing labor movement and the unions, basically, in all sectors across the economy? Like AI is not the first technology that is designed to deskill or automate certain labor out of existence, right? We go back and study machines in the 19th century and all new forms, throughout the service economy from the 60s forward up into today, which I think we just find most surprising, of course, because we never imagined that knowledge work or creative work or communicative work, could be automated. And these are the core soft skills that, generations of academics have been essentially trying to equip students with, right? If we're going to do the whole vocational model of what higher education is, that's certainly not my preference, but it is the basic prerogative of most neoliberal states when they are actually justifying the existence of public education today, right? So that's the thing I think that's very disruptive and very shocking for so many people. That these core soft skills that we are imparting to our students through these undergraduate BA degrees, through various college diplomas, and so on, now seem to be having less value in the labor market because AI is being taken out to substitute those skills. So that's new. But I love the question, and I'm sorry I can't provide a very convincing answer to it. But I would just say, as a historical question, what have been the moments in time where the labor and/or union movement has basically politicized technology? Why is it that in some moments of history, technology and the problem of technological obsolescence or technological unemployment is front and center for unions and for the labor movement? And why at other points in time, even when there are numerous emerging technologies intended to deskill or automate sort of jobs out of existence, is it not an issue at all? And how do we explain the politics of that, right? The click between the social movements in society, where the labor and union movement's at, what's going on in government law, policy, and regulation, what the media is covering and saying is a problem. Like, how do we explain, right, that crystallization of automation systems becoming a problem and a labor problem that labor activists and unionists want to address with their members and do something about?
So those were great questions so far, and I encourage folks to keep them coming. One question I have, Tanner, is kind of related to this. You've looked at unions in the entertainment and media industry, and you mentioned the Actors Guild, the Writers Guild. How do you assess the victories and the defeats? What are kind of the balance of what they achieved? And what were some of the shortcomings of what they achieved in their recent struggles against issues of AI and automation?
I think that the biggest victory of what those unions achieved was at the level of public consciousness raising. I mean, there's contractual outcomes that are very, very positive, but of course, next round of bargaining, the employers are going to do exactly the same thing. And they're already going to do things, and they already are doing things right now, regardless of what that agreement sort of says. But I think that one of the biggest victories of, they say that the Hollywood actor and writer strike was to was to politicize technology, was to politicize AI, was to sort of raise in the public mind this is a tremendously significant and important issue for public deliberation that must exist beyond just sort of those two unions and maybe other forces and relations in the labor movement, but it must be a society-wide issue that we are all talking about. And I think in the absence of that strike action, we probably would not have the sort of new round of books being published about AI, AI companies, tech companies having to actually at least address this, government law, policy, and regulatory sort of agencies and entities saying, "Oh, we need an AI ethics framework." More and more people, asking ethical and critical questions about AI in society and what the future of work will entail with it if it continues to accelerate. There were certain victories, but the biggest ones, I think, are putting that issue, politicizing technology, politicizing AI, turning it into a working class issue that we should be thinking seriously about.
You began your presentation by noting how, homogeneous is the aesthetic in the portrayal of, AI workers. And one question I have for you is, yeah, what you think the effects of AI on culture are? I've been reading some stuff recently about another technology and its impacts on culture, in particular streaming, like with Spotify and the like, and its effect on music. And I guess there's a term emerging to describe a lot of contemporary music, stream pop. And I guess the idea of stream pop is that you have songs where the singing blends into the instrumentation. You have a kind of fuzziness to the music, and it's kind of blurry on the front, at the beginning of the song and at the end of the song, so that it can transition smoothly into the next song as an integrated feature of a playlist. And the whole idea is to disincentivize people from clicking, changing, altering the playlist, allowing it to run seamlessly in the background of our lives in order to ramp up the streaming hours. Um, anyway, this example in the realm of music, I was reminded of that by some of the things you were talking about in terms of just visual imagery and the homogeneity of a lot of this. So I was wondering if you could just comment on some of the broader impacts of AI so far on culture.
We have always relied upon other human beings to inform, to educate, to inspire, to engage us, with the world of ideas, with the world of symbols, with the world of cultural products that, communicate meaning about society and culture, that represent society to itself, may underrepresent, may misrepresent, tell stories about society. And I think one of the greatest concerns is that the application of AI to these creative labor processes will indeed, flatten the culture of sorts. And I think there's something, essentially human at stake here. It's really just questions. If you're sort of a humanist, it's really the question of the human and what constitutes the human, right? Even in sort of Marx's sense of species being, like humans always were essentially creative beings, right, in their labor process and in its product. And it was capitalism that alienated them from their own species being labor process and the product, which in an ideal world would represent or express them in their nature and their species being, as opposed to some other ends decided by, Ford or GM or Tesla or Walt Disney, right? So there's this sort of that question of, what is the human and what does generative AI mean for humanness? Again, if we want to retain our humanism. Another sort of question that comes to mind is more epistemological, like how do we how we know what we know. I mean, I as an educator, I mean, have experienced over the past year a large number of students coming to know what they know simply by prompting questions and getting answers from generative AI systems. What does that mean for the entire history of knowledge? What does that mean from the institutions or the organizations that have been charged with producing and diffusing knowledge about social problems and potential solutions to them? What does this mean for the role of the professor researcher, who has historically been trained, after 10 years or more of higher education to develop certain skills and certain competencies, to ask questions purposefully and pursue truths and to share those with others? What does it mean when Paul and I, become equivalent to or even less efficient to a ChatGPT system that the student might prefer to use as opposed to come to see us during office hours or to meet with us on Zoom or even to read one of the articles or the books we've written? What becomes of the status of the book, of the scholarly monograph, right? That in a different day and age was often a repository of aggregated knowledge that intended to be useful in some context to someone. These become very difficult questions for me. I feel that my value may be reduced as an educator. So that's kind of concerning. Then I also wonder at a more like intimate or relational level, as AI enters the fabric of our interpersonal lives, of our everyday lives, is our lives as, brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and comrades and friends and caregivers and lovers and everything else. Like, do we start substituting these chatbots for other forms of human relationality that have been part of the human condition for as long as we've existed as a species? What does it mean when we start substituting, a mental health bot for an actual friend that we could confide in or a confidant? What does it mean when we start substituting, again, teachers for, useful guide on the side AI tutors? There's such profound changes in how we relate to others and ourselves as a result of these new devices that are embedded with AI systems. And I think we're only beginning to gauge the effects of this on culture as a whole. I mean, it again raises questions about the essence of being human and relating to one another as humans, right? Are we substitutable? Are we replaceable? Should we be replaceable? Can, intelligent sort of systems, can androids, do better jobs than we've done historically? Can people form meaningful, legitimate, and authentic bonds, with androids? Is that wrong? Should it be? Who gets to decide? Individuals form very, very affective relations to these systems. And as much as that feels uncomfortable for us, I would also feel quite uncomfortable saying that's wrong or bad in some way. I mean, am I to judge the person who may have, after 75 years lost their partner and now are in mourning and are finding solace in communication with an AI system embedded in a doll or a stuffed animal? Or would the argument be, well, that is no substitution? There is something kind of perplexing or potentially even unethical about that. What we need is maximized, massive social programs that are well funded and resourced where we can, properly care for society and all of the people that are experiencing pain and loss. And maybe we need more humans to do that. And what technology is basically being presented now to neoliberal governments and those corporations looking to profit maximize by selling solutions to a whole bunch of different social problems that do not, in essence, have technology as a solution. They're basically just saying, automate that too, right? Outsource that to us too. We'll solve that human or that social problem with more technology. And we've yet to really do any longitudinal study or analysis of whether or not this works in a true way.
Yeah, speaking of Marx, I think it's in the Grundrisse, he says more or less that he's looking forward to a society in which no human need do what a machine can do. But some of these technologies, I think, are uh, maybe closing the gap between those two considerations in a way perhaps Marx didn't foresee, along with many others. And it does, raise questions, the kinds of questions that maybe we have to ask, again for the first time in a long time about uh, what is distinctively human, especially in the face of um, our own creations increasingly encroaching um, on that realm of humanity. Um, Marnie had a follow-up, some interesting historical context here. When the gramophone was invented, musicians were reluctant to record their labor and creative output, knowing they were being replaced to a large degree by records. In response, the AFM negotiated additional fees from record companies into the Music Performance Trust Fund to ensure continued live music performance by union musicians. This is why you will see municipalities offering live music in parks, etc., sponsored through the AFM's MPTF. Yeah, that's interesting. It raises questions about what contemporary equivalent might be.
Thanks for that, Marnie. That's really insightful.
Just got a few minutes left, Tanner. Just wondering if you have any closing remarks that you would like to make.
Well, I just wanted to give a big thank you to you, Paul, and to colleagues in the Labor Studies Department at Brock University for having me here tonight. I also, again, just wanted to give a shout out to Robert McChesney. Rest in peace. This book that was published in 2016, People Get Ready, The Fight Against a Jobless Economy and a Citizenless Democracy, with Robert McChesney and John Nichols, is a wonderful take on basically the future of automation and capitalism. And it was written almost 10 years ago, before all of the hype around AI. And if you don't mind, I could put a link to my book in the chat. This is a book, AI and Technology is just one of 14 chapters. This book runs the entire sphere of topics and the study of work and labor in general, but as applied to the media, creative, and cultural industries. And I think it will be useful for folks, both for purposes of teaching and also maybe as a research primer as well.
I've gotten through most of it, and it's really great and written by a real flesh and blood human, and the humanity shines through. Definitely a book worth checking out. From Rutledge, work in the digital media and entertainment industries, a critical introduction, and just wanted to conclude by just saying a word about the Department of Labor Studies at Brock University. In addition to our undergraduate BA program, you can earn a certificate in labor studies on campus or online through full-time or part-time study. And we do talk about many of the issues that Tanner raised today. For example, in my Future of Work course, we talk about these issues, and I'm definitely going to start including parts of Tanner's book in that course. We also have a brand new micro certificate in labor law, and there are options for union members, union staffers, and anyone interested in making the world of work fair, more democratic, and more socially just. So you can follow our department online, on X, on Instagram, and on Facebook at Brock Labor. I just want to thank you again, Tanner. It was a really excellent talk. I was really pleased with it and really pleased with the questions that we got from the audience. To our audience, thank you for attending. It was really great to have you as part of this event. And so thank you all, and really great. And we'll see each other soon, I hope.
Thank you so much.